So the Anacrusis launched into early access earlier this month, and I've been playing it a bit in my spare time. For first impressions, I'd definitely say they're mixed. Being restricted to only playing online with randoms and not having the option to host a private match or play on my own has certainly put a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, but overall the Anacrusis is clearly aiming to be a modern alternative to Left 4 Dead, similar to a previous game I covered in the past called Earthfall. But compared to Earthfall, it seems that this game has a lot more potential behind it. To give it a review now, I think is a bit too early as there's still so much missing from the final product, so instead, I'm just going to give some of my overall feedback of certain areas of the game and leave my final review for the day it leaves early access. So, here's what I think. So to keep things brief, the Anacrusis is a sci-fi co-op shooter in the style of games like Left 4 Dead, or to be blunt about it, meet Left 4 Dead in space. At the current time, the game only consists of one game mode being the campaign mode, which has you going from point A to point B fighting against the waves of the I was about to say the undead then. If you've played Left 4 Dead, this will feel very familiar. Outside of the special enemies being a little bit different, the setup is pretty much the same. The only one major difference I can think of between the two games is the addition of matter compilers. You'll find these around the map, and these basically have traits similar to roguelikes like Hades, where you interact with it, get an option of 3 alternative skills and you choose one. The idea itself, I think, is great. It's a nice minimalist way to spice up a run of a campaign, but I think some of the skills outweigh their usefulness over others. I believe this is meant to work around the team so you make builds that work with one another, but the skills you have here are so basic that nothing really sounds that impressive outside of a huge health buff, but that might also be due to not seeing every skill the game has to offer because it's all a bit random. What I'd love to see down the line is something similar to what Risk of Rain 2 does, where once you've used a skill and unlocked it, you have a logbook with all the information in it, which you can read outside of a game. So maybe they should do something like this and also add the addition of unlocking more skills for the matter compiler from using the game's weekly challenge mode. Outside of that, there's not really much input I can give on the overall gameplay loop. In the long term, the developers want to introduce things like mod support, a season pass that'll be free, emphasis on the word free, and finally a campaign versus, but if you were hoping for that to be here at launch, I would probably hold back a bit because from the sounds of it going from a developer stream, it's going to take a while for it to be introduced, and the reason behind it makes a lot of sense.
Currently, there is not a versus mode. One of the things we did while working on Left 4 Dead even was we removed versus mode for a while so that we could get the balance of the campaign down, and that's kind of what we're doing here. We want to make sure we're making the creature choices and everything about what's the most fun for players in PvE, and then we'll go back through and decide what characters can be played in PvE and go from there. So at launch, we are PvE only, but I really like playing versus.
And after playing Back 4 Blood's versus mode, I'm completely fine with this. So like most co-op games, we have a set of new characters to play as. There's Lance, Liu, Nessa and Gion. And from the dialogue I've heard so far, they seem fine. I think it's too early to say as I don't think most of the dialogue has actually been recorded yet, but a lot of the basic stuff is there and I haven't really got much of a complaint towards it. My one complaint, however, is I would like to play as Lance, because I can't choose my character at the moment. And since again this is a co-op shooter, when a slot isn't filled or you hit the take a break button, your character is taken over by an AI, which, I mean, it isn't terrible, but it's not that good either. Sometimes the AI can be decent, following you closely without walking in front of your line of fire and doing a decent job holding hordes back, but then there's the other instances where they walk off ahead, jump straight into holes killing themselves, sometimes refuse to revive you for no reason and then decide to heal you when you're at 80 HP and then snatch up a medkit you're going to pick up. Now, I have seen worse. Back 4 Bloods is genuinely all over the place. Jim is the worst AI of the bunch, but have you noticed that since Left 4 Dead, barely any game that's followed on in its footsteps have really made a good attempt of AI being one of the key factors? Besides obviously asking to optimize the AI and improve the navigation mesh for them, I think the thing I would mostly request from it is giving them the ability to ping items for you, and then also having a cooldown so they don't pick up items immediately when you're standing right next to them. Also, if they could use grenades, that would be cool too. Something I find interesting but also slightly concerning about the Anacrusis is how it deals with difficulty, because in this game you can't actually change it. And at first that's going to sound silly because it implies that the game has only got one difficulty and that's it throughout the entire game, but it's actually all dealt with by the director, which again sounds like an interesting idea, but personally, from seeing the execution, I don't like it that much. My biggest concern comes to how the director controls and limits the restrictions for each campaign, because at the moment we know nothing about it, and from playing a couple of game sessions, the opinion of the director seems to be all over the place. I've had matches where it's played out rather easily with a load of items, a few specials, and then, you know, the odd horde. But then other games it decides to take a complete 180 and just throw everything at you with nothing there. Not having control over the difficulty makes me feel less eager to play this game for the long run, because if I know the game is going to purposely spam enemies at me for the sake of no reason, I'm not going to want to play it, especially when some of the specials are frankly rather annoying to deal with. For the most part, I like the specials. The spawner is a neat idea of how it follows you and then throws turrets at you. The eggs are just hilarious to see when someone doesn't know what's going on. Then there's the brute, which is just like a weaker tank, which again is fine. But then you've got things like the flasher, which are way too bright, and after a while of being spammed with these, you start to get a headache. But then you have enemies like the grabber and the gooper. Both of these enemies are designed to pin a player in the spot, and you need your team to help you to get free, which makes sense. It's like the smoker or the jockey or the charger. But the game doesn't really do anything to tell you when someone's been grabbed or gooed. Normally the only reason I've noticed that someone's been grabbed on my team is when my friend has actually said, you know, I need help. There's also the problem that both of these enemies can just pin you without any real build up. There's an instance where they've just appeared right in front of me and immediately grabbed me without giving me time to even process what's going on. The grabber is primarily bad at this because it can pretty much grab you from the other end of the map. It's pretty much you're just walking down a hallway and then yoink, you've been grabbed, and I'm sorry to get a bit nitpicky, but the animations of being grabbed by the grabber look rough, to put it politely. I was expecting to see something more akin to the smoker where the survivor's actually struggling to escape the grabber's clutches, but at the moment it just looks like they're floating. There's also a respawn system in this game as well, which honestly I'm not a fan of. Whenever someone dies you immediately get the option to respawn them, with the caveat being that it causes a horde, which as a concept for a risk and reward system I can understand it and I think it could work. But the issue in game is there is no restrictions set in place for it. You can call them immediately every single time, and anyone, not just yourself if you're the host, can call them back to revive them. I shouldn't need to explain why this is an issue, because this is the easiest way to grief anyone in a game. My suggestion would either be have a cooldown on it, make it a vote system, or make it so only the host can choose to do this. Also a vote to kick system. That'd be nice. The Anacrusis consists of 6 weapons currently: a pistol, SMG, rifle, shotgun, and a couple of heavy weapons that involve a laser and electricity. And the only weapon I really like in this game is the SMG. The rest just feel weak. Most of the weapons in the Anacrusis have a lack of feedback when using them. When you fire them, there isn't a whole lot of satisfaction to it. The heavy weapons are amusing at first, sure, but after a while I haven't found a lot of use for them. And then with the shotgun and the assault rifle, they're not much better either. The shotgun sounds rather weak when you fire it, and the rifle's fire rate just feels inefficient when compared to using the SMG. At best, the only way you'll know you've truly killed someone is from the kill marker and the sound that plays sometimes when you land a headshot. And personally, I'm not a fan of this. I want to see that I've killed something and not hear it. I'm aware that there's a design choice made for this game to avoid using gore and dismemberment due to the brighter colours and overall lighter theming, which is honestly fine. I don't expect the game to be gory like Doom, but I think some form of feedback from the aliens is needed. A good example would be when I was talking to my friend while we were playing it earlier, and he thought, if they don't want gore, why not have something like burn marks or possibly disintegration? It's a sci-fi game, you know, be a bit more creative with it. Something I will praise, however, is the grenades. There's a few different ones for different scenarios, like a shield, basic explosive, fire grenades, and some more sci-fi kind of designs, like a grenade that makes time slow in a bubble, or my personal favourite, a vortex grenade, which just grabs everything together in a certain radius and then sends it flying. The only issue I have with grenades currently is throwing them can feel a little bit inconsistent. They do work well, but when you throw them it doesn't feel like I've even done anything when hitting the grenade key. It feels more like I've just hit G and then a grenade just spawned on the floor and then blown up. Either the model needs to be enlarged ever so slightly or have a trail where it's being shown, or maybe it needs a proper animation to be thrown like in Left 4 Dead. But overall I think the entire weapon system probably needs a rework. Going through the episodes more directly, I think my order of preference goes from episode 3 being my favourite to episode 2 being my least preferred. They're not bad levels. In their own ways, they have their moments, but I think overall they could have been improved slightly. With episode 1, there's a couple of areas I'd suggest need tweaking. Firstly, the elevator in the mall seems to have confused a lot of people because it has the means to change direction if you hit a button going up or down. I think it'd even be better to make it so the elevator changes colour depending on the direction it goes, or maybe if you go back down it's only for a short time when you hit the button, then it reverts back to the original way, or just make it that depending on which room you enter from, it just takes you to the other end. The other issue I have with this campaign as well is the garden area later on for some reason causes a horde. There's no indication as to why. You just drop down into the garden and then there's just this massive horde overthrowing you, but it's not that fun to deal with when you're playing online with random people. Again, this could be avoided if I could have a private match function, but here we are. Also, there's the finale, which I like the idea of the finale. It's just a simple holdout arena, but for some reason the director goes overboard with this, spamming enemies over and over again. We've had a time where we've had 3 grabbers just appear and grab 3 teammates, with 1 person alive being gooed, and just fail the entire thing. I think for a finale, because of how small the map is, it's meant to be more close quarter combat, which is fine, but the director needs to limit itself and tone it back a bit. But then again, it's not as bad as episode 2. I think of the 3 episodes, like I said before, episode 2 is my least favourite. The objective is to obtain a radioactive sample and then make your way back to the lift. It's a simple campaign that has, I believe, 2 levels, the first level being making your way deeper into the station as you're looking for the anomaly, and then the second level is once you find the anomaly you put it in a container and then take it all the way back to the elevator in the first level to leave. But there's a catch. The item in question is radioactive and has a meter of how hot it can get, and if it gets too hot you automatically drop it, so you have to cycle through carrying it with the rest of your team. Which, I can imagine you already realise how this could be a bad thing, because if you're playing single player, you can't give it to anyone else. You have to keep stopping and starting through this hallway while there's an ongoing horde. Also, I don't know if it's just me, but episode 2 ends rather abruptly. I get the point of the campaign is just to retrieve the sample and return to where you started, but it feels like it's missing a conclusion. I feel like there should have been a 3rd level after the safe room. I imagine we might end up seeing a cutscene to summarise what happens closer to launch, but at the moment, it just feels like it ends without any warning. Episode 3 I think hits a sweet spot for me. It's decently paced, has a fun finale to it, and overall it's just the best layout. I will admit, the first time I played it, I had no idea what to do with the finale since the game instructor didn't tell us what to do. But that's a larger problem. And then there's also this issue which this episode and the first episode have as well, where you have to interact with 2 buttons to start a horde. In a game like Portal 2, I understand why this is a thing, but in a co-op shooter where you're either playing with AI on your own or you're playing with random people you've never met before, having 2 buttons to start a horde makes little to no sense, because you have to time it, and there's not much communication in the game currently. There's no, I don't believe there's text chat and voice chat. You know, I personally don't want to use it. But besides that, for the most part, it's pretty good. It randomly features a room that looks like a virtual reality room, which is neat, and it gives this idea that they could experiment more with different rooms having different features, so I really do hope they expand on this more with stuff like an anti-grav room. I think overall what they could do with future campaigns is really push to have a bit more experimentation with the environments you play in, so things like, again, a low gravity room or a low oxygen room, making it so you have to really quickly get through a level because you're going to run out of oxygen. It's a sci-fi game, you know, I want to see how ridiculous it can get. I know I've mentioned this a few times already, but the lack of a game instructor telling a player what to do is a bit of an issue for new players. So things like pointing out objectives and when teammates are pinned are almost non-existent, so you just end up dying or wasting a lot of time wandering around an area because you have no idea what you're meant to do. I feel like the overall HUD should be updated over time, which is fine, but tutorials or just a means to explain what you're doing in the game really need to be added at this point. There's other things as well, like matchmaking being utterly bare bones, and it's bad enough that I'm not able to make a private game while playing single player, but not having the means to choose whether I want to join a game in progress or start a new lobby is frankly awful. I've had instances where it's thrown me into US servers at the end of campaigns for some reason, even though I'm in the UK, and other times I can't find a game at all and it just throws me into a completely different episode. I'd love to see a redesign of this campaign screen as well, where instead of a grid layout, we have something more akin to Left 4 Dead, where it's a dedicated lobby system and you can look for specific campaigns in a list. A couple of minor things I'd like to see down the line as well is a feature to turn off hit markers and kill markers, and possibly even the crosshair, because again, personally, I'm just not a fan of it. I think the Anacrusis does have potential to be a fun game. I don't think it's going to be the Left 4 Dead killer that people are looking for. I don't think anybody's going to achieve that without Valve's budget. But the Anacrusis hits a certain sweet spot that Left 4 Dead has left open for a few years now, and with the features and mod support coming out soon, I think this game could be really good. Again, if you're curious about the game, wishlist it at least, but probably don't buy it until it's closer to launch. But if you're curious and just want to see more gameplay of the Anacrusis, well, I tend to stream these games a lot over on my Twitch channel, so, you know, links in the description if you want to see that. I will end up outdating this video at some point, so I will update the description and the title to say outdated, but I will come back to review it when it's fully released. I wish Stray Bombay the best of luck with making this game. I think it's a lot of fun, and I will be in their Discord to give back feedback when I can, but please, for the love of God, let me turn off crosshairs.